I guess let's go ahead and get started. We've just got some introduction material to go through first, so if anyone joins, they shouldn't miss too much. So I want to welcome everyone to the first CAC meeting since the county has taken over the Viers Mill Road BRT project. My name's Corey Pitts. I'm the planning section manager within the Division of Transportation Engineering at DOT. So I've been working on a number of the BRT projects, and in a couple of slides we'll run through some introductions and you'll meet some of the other staff working on the project as well. Next slide. So, you know, we've done a number of virtual meetings since the pandemic has started, but, you know, we still haven't perfected everything. There may be a few bumps, so, you know, please bear with us. You know, if you have questions or something's not working out for you, you know, let one of us know and we'll try and get things working. I'm going to touch on a few basic controls on, you know, how to interact with us during the Zoom meeting. But the first thing I want to note is that we are recording the meeting. We'll be posting the recording once the meeting's over to the project website. So, you know, if you don't want your likeness or your voice recorded, you know, use the chat features to communicate with us, and I wouldn't turn on your cameras, but I just want to let everyone know that we are recording the meeting just like we would a normal in-person meeting. In terms of sending us questions, if you don't want to voice that through your microphone, at the bottom of the screen, you'll see some tabs pop up. One will say chat. If you click on the chat window, it'll bring up a chat window. It defaults to sending the chat to everyone, but one of our staff members, Jennifer, is the one monitoring the questions. So if you do the drop down where it says everyone, you'll see, and you can actually specifically chat with specific people in the meeting. So we would ask that you send your questions directly to Jennifer, and she'll be breaking in the meeting as we talk, as questions start to compile. So otherwise, you see the mute and the stop and start video functions. I think most people by this point are pretty familiar with that on Zoom if you've been participating in Zoom meetings. The only other thing is if you don't want to see a bunch of gray window screens with names on them, if you hover over the stop video feature or start video feature and click on the arrow and go to video settings, it'll bring up an additional window and you can check the box that says hide non-participant or non-video participants, and all the gray squares will disappear and you'll just see those of us that have our cameras on, but that's your own personal preference. So next slide. Okay, I guess before I get into the BRT program update, I did want to kind of introduce the other staff that are with us this evening. So on the call from DOT, we have Michael Mitchell, who's the project manager for the project. So you'll be hearing more from Michael later on in the presentation. You want to introduce yourself or say hi, Michael?
Sure, this is Michael Mitchell. As Corey indicated, I am the project manager for this project, the one we are meeting on tonight.
Great. Also from DOT, we have Joanna Conklin, who's the BRT program manager. Would you like to say hi, Joanna? Oh, looks like Joanna may have dropped out.
Sorry, hold on. I was on mute. I have two different mute buttons and I only turned one on. So welcome. Thanks for coming today. I'm Joanna Conklin from the DOT Director's Office, and I manage the BRT program. I think I've met many of you in person, you know, the last time we were meeting. So welcome.
Thank you. We also have Darcy Buckley from the Director's Office, who's one of our planners in the BRT program.
Hi, everyone. It's good to see you tonight. Welcome.
Thanks, Darcy. And then from the consultant team, we've got Christine Sutkowski, who's with RK&K. So they're the lead designers on the project. Monica Mead, also from RK&K, and then helping us out on kind of the meeting and running the Zoom. We've got Jennifer Owers, who's with Clark Design, and Scott, who shows up as MCDOT in the square. So you can't see Scott. He's working in the background, controlling everything. So I wanted to go just kind of quickly around, and I'll call out your name and you can say hi and anything else you want to mention. But given that it's a small group, I'd like to go around and have everyone just kind of introduce themselves. So I'll start at least with the first person that shows up on my screen. Mensa, would you like to say anything?
My name is Mensa Joga. I'm a member of Mid-County Citizen Advisory Board, and I have been working with Viers Mill CAC project since the beginning.
Great. Thank you, Mensa. Glad you could join us. Ethan Goffman.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ethan. I live in East Rockville, not too far from Viers Mill, and I do some transit writing and environmental writing.
Great. Thank you, Ethan. Glad you could join us. Jamie Hare.
Hi, my name is Jamie Herr. I live in Wheaton. I take Viers Mill every day to drop my kid at daycare. And I'm a passionate advocate for BRT, transit, and I am a city planner by trade. So
Great.
Excited to be here.
Thanks, Jamie. Jonathan Fink.
Yes, hello. I'm a resident of the Camp Mill neighborhood near Brookside Gardens, so not far from Viers Mill Road. I'm a strong advocate for bus rapid transit. I formerly chaired the Wheaton Redevelopment Advisory Committee, and we had Mark Elrich back in those days come and talk to us before his current position. And I've been on the CAC. Looking forward to tonight's meeting. Thank you for arranging this.
Great. Glad you could be with us. Mike Stein.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mike Stein. Like Mensa, I've been involved with the CAC since the beginning. I live in the Twinbrook neighborhood along Viers Mill and currently serving as president of the Twinbrook Community Association. So I'm interested to hear what progress has been made and what the next steps are going forward.
Great. Glad you can be with us. Sarah Moline.
Hi, I am also a Twinbrook resident, and I have also been here from the start, and I am excited to see how things are going to start progressing.
Great. Thanks for being with us. Jessica Reynolds.
Evening. I have also been with the CAC group here since the beginning, also living in Twinbrook. Our house is a couple of blocks from Viers Mill. So looking forward to hearing the updates, and thanks for having this.
Great, thanks for being here. Van Tran. All right, Craig Wilson. Okay, Luisa, would you like to say hi?
Yes, hi. Thank you, Corey. Luisa Montero. I'm the Mid-County Regional Area Office Director. Work for the Office of the County Executive and also with the County Council, and both of which are very excited about this project. I also staff the Mid-County Citizens Advisory Board and the Wheaton Urban District Advisory Committee. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Great. And then I see we've got a couple friends of ours from the Planning Department, Dave Anspacher.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, David Anspacher at the Montgomery County Planning Department. I work on transportation planning issues.
And Walker Freer.
Good evening, everyone. Walker Freer, also with the Montgomery County Planning Department. I'm a transportation planner, and I also worked on the Viers Mill Corridor Master Plan. So excited to see the progress that's happening so far and to continue working with MCDOT.
Thank you. So I guess without further ado, let's jump right in. We're going to start with just a quick update on kind of where the BRT program is in general. Obviously, we're all here to talk about the Maryland 586 Viers Mill Road BRT project this evening. That project is in planning and preliminary engineering design. We're currently funded through completion of preliminary design in the county budget. And to go any further, additional funding would be needed. We've also have our US 29 Flash project between Silver Spring and Burtonsville. That project's been under construction for about the last 2 years, give or take, and we're slated to open sometime next month. So we're pretty excited about that. So that'll be the first Flash corridor that will open in the county. And then we're also actively working on the Maryland 355 BRT corridor. That corridor will run between Clarksburg and Bethesda and has a little bit of an overlap with the Viers Mill project in the city of Rockville. And it too is also in the planning and preliminary engineering design phase and is funded through preliminary design over the next 4 years for that particular project. Next slide. So just a quick outline of how tonight's meeting is going to go. So we're going to do a quick recap, although it sounds like many of you should be familiar with the alternative that was selected given your tenure with the previous CAC. But we're going to just kind of quickly recap, the state study and the selection of alternative 2.5, review some of the details of that alternative 2.5, talk about the BRT characteristics and how the station prototype design has evolved as we've advanced the US 29 project and how that will then carry over into the Viers Mill project. Provide an overview of the recent work, and that will entail taking a closer look at the station locations and the queue jump locations. The team's been working on refining those since the state's work. So Christine will be covering those updates. And then we'll talk about next steps for the project, where it goes from here. I think most of you are familiar, but for anyone that isn't, the state completed their work roughly in 2018 with a planning study that looked at an evaluation and selection of various alternatives for BRT service on the Viers Mill Road corridor. It proposed a number of BRT station locations and queue jumps. It also identified the service plan for how the BRT would operate in the corridor, identified property as well as environmental impacts associated with each of the alternatives, modeled and forecasted ridership and traffic impacts associated with the alternatives, and estimated conceptual capital costs for each alternative as well. As that project came to what we thought, or what the state thought was their conclusion, they took those findings to the council, and the council requested that a new alternative be explored, what we're calling alternative 2.5, which was a blended alternative. And that alternative carries aspects from the infrastructure piece of alternative 2, which was primarily mixed traffic and queue jumps, and also took the operational enhancements, which was a higher frequency service using BRT vehicles and stations from alternative 3, and blended those two together. And that was ultimately the alternative that the county council selected as their recommended alternative, but they did retain alternative 3, which would have more dedicated lanes as the long-term master plan option as the corridor itself kind of transitions. So planning and design and construction of alternative 2.5 is what we're moving forward as part of this project. So in terms of the elements, when we talk about what does it mean to have BRT on Viers Mill Road, we're talking about a frequent service. So we're talking 15-minute frequency or greater. We were talking uniquely branded vehicles and stations, and we've got some pictures of those that you'll see in the presentation as we work through it. Transit signal priority and queue jumps. And not last, but definitely not least, is bike and pedestrian improvements to make it easier to access the stations. We recognize that many of the riders will arrive either by bike or by foot, and that just by building the infrastructure for the transit itself alone will not solve the problems. We actually need to improve access along the corridor as well. So this is just a map, an updated map of the project and the station locations. As I mentioned in a couple of slides, Christine will start going over each of those station locations and kind of the current thinking of, you know, siting and concept design for the stations. So just a little bit more detail on kind of the elements that we're talking. So in terms of running way, we would be taking advantage or kind of reinforcing the shoulder use that the bus currently has and lane use. So, you know, there are signs along the corridor that indicate that there are bus lanes on the corridor or lanes for the bus and right turning vehicles. Those don't always get obeyed. So we're looking at, you know, ways to kind of more strictly enforce that feature so that the bus can take greater advantage of those, as well as identifying locations for queue jumps. And the video you see there shows the concept of a queue jump. So it allows the bus to kind of jump to the side, get in front of the traffic that's stopped in the intersection and get in advance of it so that it can move forward and not get bogged down in the congestion there. And at this point in time, Alternative 2.5 makes no changes to the service road. I know Alternative 3 does call for that. So that's the longer term vision, but this particular plan will not have any changes to the service roads. In terms of fare collection, we are talking about off-board fare collection. So you would pay your fare at the station, and when the bus arrives, you would just board the bus and move along. In terms of technology, kind of two big pieces of it. So we're talking transit signal priority, and we've identified 9 intersections along the corridor that are suitable for transit signal priority. And this will allow the bus to communicate with the traffic signal equipment and either ask for an extension of the green time, or if the signal is currently red, we'll ask if the signal can be advanced to green sooner, all while working within the kind of existing traffic operation. So it's not preemption. It doesn't take over the intersection and just make it green for the bus, but it's looking for ways to kind of steal some time at the intersection. And then real-time arrival information. So each station will have screens that will inform the passengers when the next bus is arriving. In terms of service, I know I mentioned that, you know, in terms of BRT service, we think 15 minutes or greater, but the current service plans for the Viers Mill corridor call for a 6-minute peak frequency and 10-minute off-peak frequency. So it's pretty frequent service throughout the day. You know, even in the off-peak periods when a lot of the service goes away on many of our transit corridors, 10 minutes is still greater than even some of our peak services that we currently have. We'd also be looking to kind of reinforce and think about better ways to make connections to local and regional service. So how does the services connect at the metro stations, and how do you connect to the other local ride-on and metro bus routes? In terms of the vehicles, I mentioned uniquely branded articulated BRT vehicles. So this is an image of the flash bus that will be operating on US 29. So I imagine something similar would be operating on Viers Mill when that service starts. 3 doors, and with the off-board fare collection, you can board or alight through any of those 3 doors. So again, speeding up that boarding process. The stations will be constructed with near level boarding. So we'll be bringing the platform height up to the height of the bus so that we don't have to kneel the bus, again, saving on time at the station. And the bike racks for the bus are actually on the bus itself. So no more having to hop off the curb, drop that awkward bike rack down off the front of the bus and mount your bike on the front of the bus. You'll just wheel into the rear of the vehicle, and there are bike racks inside the bus that you'll put your bike into. And then we've identified 12 new station locations. In the next couple of slides, I'll go through what those stations will look like. So this is a rendering of the station prototype concept. This was developed with a CAC grant and working with stakeholders in the community. We developed the concept. So you've got the station canopies that are individual that can be nested together. So this allows us to kind of build the station out as ridership demand grows along the corridor. So we could start with maybe just one station canopy and work our way up to 4. And the elements of the station canopy are intended to mimic kind of a tree-like structure. So they've got a single point of connection to the ground. There's wood roofing up on the underside of the roof to kind of soften the station elements and not have it all just be metal. Within the station canopies, there's lighting that comes through the station column, through that perforated shroud. The station marker will identify where the station location is. It'll be lit and visible at night, include the flash logo. And then within the station marker will be the real-time screen that will indicate when the next bus will arrive, as well as maps and push buttons to announce for those that have visual difficulty when the next bus is arriving. There'll be the ticket vending machines. Those will be where cash paying customers or credit card paying customers would purchase their ticket to board the bus before arrival. And then if you have a smart trip card, you'll tap your card on the tap pull validators that will be located at the entrance to the station platform. Windscreens along the rear of the station to provide for wind protection and weather protection. Ample seating through a combination of benches as well as lean rails along the back side of the station. And then one of the other technology enhancements that we're looking to add that also provides some revenue in terms of marketing is what is a smart city media screen. So that will provide advertisements at the station, but it's also an interactive screen. So if you get off the bus and you're wondering where the closest Starbucks is, you can search for it on the screen. It will also share information about bus arrival information and other routes that are nearby. And then some of the other ancillary things associated with the stations are the plantings on the side for stormwater management and just to provide some additional green, as well as the pedestrian access and bike racks nearby. So next slide.
Corey, we have a question from Jonathan Fink about one of the previous slides.
Sure.
He asks, how is a request for a green light dispositioned?
So it's, as the bus approaches the intersection, the bus is always announcing its arrival. The signal cabinet will take that request, and if it can fit it in within the existing signal phasing, you know, if it can hold the signal for an additional 5 to 10 seconds, it will do so. If it can advance the signal and terminate the cross street green early, it will do so. So it's not a preemption like some emergency vehicles have, where it will always request it and always get it. It's more of a calculation that the signal cabinet will do, again, to try and get seconds of time on the arrival of the vehicle.
Great. And we have another question from Mike Stein about the slide we just talked about. Will the stations have any anti-graffiti measures? For example, will it be easy to clean graffiti from the clear screens?
So we've had those discussions as we've been designing and fabricating those elements for the 29 project. So there's a couple of different things we can do with the screens. They can be coated with kind of an anti-graffiti coating that can be removed if there's any graffiti. That's one way to do it. The other thing that we've discussed is whether we would put any sort of printing on the screens, whether, you know, a design or some kind of other pattern on the screen, which would deter people from spray painting would be one other option. So there are options available, and we have thought about ways to try and keep that down.
Michael, did you have something to add?
Yes, Scott, can you go back to the previous slide for a second, please? I just wanted to share with some of you who may not be familiar. If you look at the curb to the right side of the image, that's the standard curb that's about 6 inches high. And what you see here, it transitions to a higher curb about 12 inches. That is the raised platform that Corey previously mentioned, which allows level boarding. That's just what I wanted to point out.
Thanks, Michael. So this is just an image of one of the stations that's under construction on the 29 corridor. Pretty close to complete. There's just a couple of elements left to install, but you can see, you know, the actual design and construction mimics very closely to what the concept started as. So I guess we'll pause there briefly before we go on. Are there any other questions before we kind of jump into what's actually occurring on the project at this time?
We do. I just got one from Louisa. She
I
asked,
can ask it if you want.
yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, it made me think and looking and frankly, like, this is really beautiful. I love the kind of the stenciling of the lattice and the way the lighting goes. So these are beautiful stations. But just because I got off an Arts and Entertainment District meeting earlier today, I'm wondering if there was contemplated any possibility for like local artists to provide art for these. And I'm thinking particularly as you get into the Arts and Entertainment District in Wheaton. Anyway, I thought they're beautiful as they are, but is there any chance for some nuance?
Yes. So, this is kind of the standard template of the stations. And again, some stations will have all of these elements. Some may not have all of the elements, depend on the environment that the station's in. But it's a little hard to see, and maybe Scott can hover. Yeah, you can go back to the other image, Scott. So in front of each of the benches, you'll see kind of a little cutout in the station platform. What we've done is we've actually worked with the Arts on the Block group. I don't know how many of you all are familiar with that, but it's a group that uses high school students from Montgomery County, and they is artist apprentices with studio artists to create mosaic tile art. And that can be inlaid into the station platform, and it provides a little bit of kind of a distinctive characteristic to each station that doesn't necessarily detract from the overall station. We are looking for other ways to include art. This was just the way for at least the 29 project that we figured out a way to do that, and thought it was a really great way to include Arts on the Block, which we've been working with on other transit projects previously. So each of the stations will have 2 mosaic tile art pieces that are unique to each station platform on the 29 project. And that's something we could do for Wheaton or other options as well. Let's see a question from Sarah. Yes, I'm wondering about art. Previously worked in the art transit and Vermont. So, I guess if there are other questions about art, we can definitely talk about that. But that, at least on the 29 project, that's how we're incorporating art into the project. But we're always looking for new and different ways to try and figure out how to do that. Question from Ethan about how the routes will be named. Great question. We've spent a fair amount of time talking about this, and for the time being, since we've only got one route, we're just calling it the Flash, or the Flash 29. Obviously, as Viers Mill advances and gets closer to reality, we'll have to think about how to name each corridor. Obviously, colors is probably not the best way to do it, given that the Metro Rail system already uses a color system. So we are trying to think of some unique ways, someone naming each of the routes after birds. But so if anyone has any kind of creative ideas, we're definitely open to ideas for ways to name routes that is more than just kind of, either the name Viers Mill Flash or Flash Viers Mill, or just, a standard route number like we currently do on many of the ride-on routes or the Metro bus routes.
Mensa also had a question about how long the current funding is going to last.
So the current funding gets us through preliminary design. So it'll take us to about the 30% milestone. And we expect to be at that point by about this time next year. So the current funding will get us to that 30% milestone. We expect to wrap that work up, like I said, in about a year's time. And at that point in time, and this is typical for most capital projects in the county, we would go back to the planning board and do what's called mandatory referral. So we would take the project at the 30% milestone and present, what we found, what the project impacts are, what the costs are, how the design has evolved to the planning board. They would weigh in with comments, and then we would also take the project back to the county council, to the Transportation and Environment Committee, and present, you know, the advanced design, the advanced cost details, the project impacts, comments that we've heard from the community, comments that we've heard from the planning board and other stakeholders like the city of Rockville. And at that point in time, a decision would be made as to whether to fund the project for final design and construction, to set the project, or whether the project's not worth moving forward. So that's typical for all of our projects. You know, on the capital side of things, is we usually get to that 30% milestone, and then there's a decision point to be made. So the current funding takes us to that point. All right, next slide. Oh, looks like, yeah.
Okay, we skipped one, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just going to quickly go through some of these details. So in terms of projected ridership, we forecasted roughly 6,400 new daily boardings, or 6,400 total daily boardings for the 700 of which were completely new. So those were new transit riders that weren't currently already taking transit in the corridor. So that's a great benefit of the BRT, as it attracts new riders. We actually found that we were improving car and truck travel times with the benefits that we were making to transit operations along the corridor, and also improving transit reliability, which is a big piece. You know, I think at the end of the day, a lot of people will comment that, you know, the BRT doesn't seem to be going, you know, a whole lot faster, you know, from, say, you know, cutting travel time in half. But the piece that we find that is really critical is improving that reliability, because if you can count on that transit trip to be the same time every day, regardless of time of day, that's really what makes transit a usable option for people. And the same is true for any mode. So if we can improve reliability, we find that that's where the real benefit is. And we'll do that through the dedicated bus lanes and shoulder use, as well as the transit signal priority. In terms of cost, and these will get refined and further improved upon as we get to the conclusion of preliminary design. But at the time of the state study, the engineering construction estimate was about $51.5 million. 11 million of that was in right-of-way, so purchasing easements or parcels of property needed to implement the project. About 13.5 million of that would be in vehicles, and that figure updated using the costs for the Flash 29 vehicles, bringing the total project cost to roughly 76.1 million. As I mentioned, that the engineering and construction cost will get refined as our engineering pencils get a little bit sharper through this process, as will the right-of-way piece. You know, we'll find, you know, do we really need all of that parcel? Can we get by with just an easement, or can we completely avoid some of the impacts that the state identified in their planning level design? And then in terms of annual operating costs, we're looking at a number of around 3.9 million to operate the service. And that's based on the costs that we identified for the US 29 Flash operations. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael now, who's going to talk more specifically about the project itself.
Thank you, Corey. Corey gave you the background of the whole BRT program and what SHA's study for this project had found up to this point. What we have done, we are in what we call the planning or concept design phase. So we reviewed more closely the existing conditions, such as, you know, the proximity of homes or other obstacles to some of the proposed stations. That's just for an example. And Corey went over the adjustment to the prototype for the station design in more detail. So I think that's been covered. And as he indicated, as we move forward, once US 29 opens, obviously we will learn more and we can incorporate what we learned from that corridor to use on this project, the Viers Mill Corridor project. So we can fine tune, you know, the elements we have, the features we have at the stations, and as you all mentioned, you know, incorporating art or artistic designs into the stations. As far as the, sharpening our design, we updated the station locations. Christine is going to go over those in more detail, but this was based on what was found at the conclusion of SHA's study as far as some station locations, and if I may use the term promises, some promises were made based on the public or Parkland planning or City of Rockville input. So as I said, Christine will go over that, and we have fine-tuned the queue jump locations and also the uninterrupted dedicated lanes for the BRT. We are coordinating with stakeholders, such as meeting with you all tonight. We appreciate you joining us. We value your input. We have also coordinated and met with our colleagues in Park and Planning, and we met with the staff of City of Rockville, and we will go before the City of Rockville Council in October. And we won't get into it in that much detail tonight because I think there's plenty of different material to cover tonight. But one component of this project, as Corey indicated, the technical name for it is station access. I personally call it the feeders. That's what feeds every station, bringing the users, the passengers that are, most of them are going to be on foot or hopefully as it's increasing by using bicycles to get to the stations. So as a component of this project, we also identify, especially within a half-a-mile corridor radius of every station, how to bring people on foot or via bicycle to the stations. That's a component of what we are working on. We look at what the master plan called for. We, kind of a bird's eye view at this stage because we are only planning, but that's a component. As we get into planning and final design, obviously we will fine-tune that in more detail. Okay, and as far as the capital cost, Corey gave you what SHA had come up with during their study. Roughly, without operating costs, it's about 76 million. That's at this stage. Keep in mind, we are only in planning design. I call it the bird's eye view of, developing things. As we get into the meat of the design, we identify more, detailed elements of the design or obstacles, for instance, utilities or other issues during preliminary and final design. The cost estimate will get more fine-tuned. And I'll just briefly touch upon it. Corey talked about it. We do have funding, as Corey indicated, for preliminary design, which will start in fairly soon, in October. By the end of October, we're going to start preliminary design. We're going to finish the planning phase, the concept design, probably before the end of October, and then we will start the preliminary design. And then the way our budget cycle works, every 2 years, next summer, we will be preparing our budget submission, the executive branch, and this project will be one of amongst the many different transportation projects. We will update the funding request, if you will, that's the layman's term for it, for this project to fund us to go beyond preliminary design. Next slide. At this point, I will turn it over to Christine. She will go over the station locations, where they are, where they got moved to, and also briefly touch upon the queue jumps.
Thank you, Michael. So for this portion, I'm going to share my screen. Corey, maybe could you just give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen and my cursor moving? Great, thank you. So I just wanted to reiterate what Michael and Corey said about our focus for this recent work, and that really was related to refining the BRT station and queue jump locations that were identified as part of Alternative 2.5 for the previous study. So there are certainly a number of elements that we will focus on further in preliminary design. As Michael mentioned, the bicycle and pedestrian improvements, providing access to the station. That includes the locations for transit signal priority. Corey mentioned that there were 9 locations. We could potentially add more or have fewer as we work through design. Some of the station features, like where the canopies go at each location or how art is incorporated, is another example of details for further stages of design. So So tonight I'm just going to highlight some of the major changes to station and queue jump locations since the previous study. So this is an overview map of the Viers Mill BRT project corridor. The BRT route is shown in orange, and it traverses the entire length of Viers Mill Road, going from Wheaton on the east end, shown on the right side of the page here, all the way up to Rockville, with a short extension of the BRT route along Maryland 355. Just to familiarize yourself a little bit with this map, the station-only locations are shown in the blue color. A location where there is only a queue jump, no station, is shown in the green color. And then locations where there are both BRT stations and queue jumps are shown with both blue and green. So before I take a deeper dive into each of these locations specifically, I did want to highlight the major changes in locations since the previous study. It sounded like a lot of you on the call tonight were previously involved, which is good to hear. So you may recognize that some of these intersection locations changed over the past couple of years. So starting on the east end, I'll zoom in a little here. The BRT station that was proposed between Connecticut Avenue and University Boulevard was initially proposed at Newport Mill Road, shown in this yellow dot here. That station has now been moved to Norris Drive, an adjacent intersection nearby. And that's because we've learned that a new traffic signal is being installed by the state by the end of this year at Norris Drive. And shifting the BRT station to that intersection allowed us to avoid some residential impacts at Newport Mill Road. Moving towards the middle of the corridor, a previous station was proposed at Parkland Drive, shown in this yellow halo here. And that was to be compatible with the Montrose Parkway extension that would connect with Parkland Drive at Viers Mill Road. And we're now moving under the assumption that Montrose Parkway will not be constructed by the time the BRT is in place. So we made a decision to shift the BRT station, again, just to a nearby intersection. That's at Robindale Drive. And that allows the BRT to serve an existing high ridership location. There's a lot of riders using the local bus at Robindale today because of the Rock Creek Terrace apartment complex at that intersection. And then towards the west end, the first thing we did was add a station at Atlantic Avenue. And Michael mentioned some commitments made as part of the previous study. This is an example of a commitment to add a station at Atlantic. So we did do that. That commitment was made in coordination with the City of Rockville and based on some public comments received. And Atlantic was identified as a BRT station location, again, because of high local bus ridership and for the potential for future redevelopment at the Twinbrook Shopping Center at that intersection. And then lastly, a station at Edmonston Drive replaces the stations that were previously proposed at Maryland 28 and at Broadwood Drive. The station at Edmonston allows for spacing or distance between the BRT stations. And again, this change was made in coordination with the City of Rockville. I'll zoom back out and move to our previous map. So in the interest of time, I'm gonna zoom into each location, but cover them relatively quickly. And I'll pause after each one to take some questions. But I also wanted to offer that if anyone had some more detailed questions at each station location, I can stay on after our formal presentation to answer some questions in more detail. So we're gonna start on the west end in Rockville, starting with the westernmost station at Montgomery College. And I think those of you who are involved with the study previously are used to looking at these types of displays, but in case you're not, I'll just familiarize yourself quickly with this. So this is an overhead view, in this case, at the station on Montgomery College's campus. And each of the sheets includes a legend on the left side with a number of elements, but I did want to point out that the proposed BRT station footprint is shown in this purple color. Proposed sidewalk and trail is shown in pink. The lanes where the BRT is in mixed traffic are shown in this tan color, and then lanes where the BRT is in a dedicated lane are shown in orange. So the station at Montgomery College is located along South Campus Drive. It's adjacent to existing local bus stops along Campus Drive there. The BRT would enter onto campus from Manakee Street off of 355, which is just off to the right side of the page here. It would turn onto the Campus Drive loop and stop at a single platform to drop off and pick up passengers. This platform is in approximately the same location as it was in the previous study, but based on some of the station changes that Corey mentioned earlier, the footprint of the platform has gotten slightly smaller. And the existing sidewalk along the south side of Campus Drive would wrap around the station platform as shown in pink here. Any questions, Jen, before I move on to the next one?
Yeah, we just got one from Jessica Reynolds. She asked, what was the city of Rockville's rationale for preferring a station at Edmonston instead of at 28 Norbeck and Broadwood?
At 28, we, in coordination with them, recognized that there were residential impacts at that intersection, more so than at Edmonston and Broadwood. So Edmonston became a more attractive option in terms of fewer impacts. And then between Edmonston and Broadwood, the existing local bus ridership was about the same at each one. So to maintain some spacing between the proposed BRT stations, Edmonston was selected. Okay, I'll move on to the next location, which is at the Rockville Metro. And here I should note, Corey mentioned that the Maryland 355 BRT study is also underway in planning and preliminary engineering. So our team has been in coordination with that design team, and we'll continue to coordinate with them as we both move into preliminary design and final design. So this is a portion where both of those projects overlap along Maryland 355. So the Viers Mill Road BRT stations are proposed along 355 at the intersection with Park Road, very close to the Rockville Metro's Kiss and Ride lot. There are two platforms, one in each direction. The southbound platform, hopefully you can see my cursor here, does require closure of one of the existing entrances to the parking garage at this property. It's 255 Rockville Pike. However, there are two existing entrances to that parking garage, so we would maintain keeping one of those entrances open, the easternmost entrance. And the northbound BRT station is located along the curb in front of the Kiss and Ride lot, adjacent to the existing local bus stop, which is on the corner of 355 and Park here. And this would allow pretty direct access to the Metro entrance via the Kiss and Ride lot. Any questions on that one, Jen?
No, none yet.
Okay, I will keep moving. The next improvement location does not include a BRT station, but does still include a queue jump at Maryland 28. And this is a queue jump in the westbound direction only, which is shown via that orange shading. So the way this would work is BRT vehicles that are traveling westbound towards Rockville would use the existing right turn only lane and would pull right up to the intersection. And in this case, we have physical improvements to the median island there so that the BRT vehicle could pull up, allowing it to separate from general traffic that's lining up at the signal, and then travel through the intersection and continue on northward towards Rockville. So those who are in this lane to turn right, not on the bus in general purpose vehicles, would still be forced to turn right via signage or marking, and the BRT would be allowed to travel through. That's sort of the typical layout and approach for the queue jumps, which you'll see at numerous locations as I go through them. I'll move on to the next location, which I mentioned is a new location for the BRT station, and includes a queue jump. That's at Edmonston Drive. Here, a queue jump lane is included in the eastbound direction, shown in that orange color again. It would operate similar to the previous location at Maryland 28. The BRT would enter into the dedicated bus lane on the right side. It would bypass the traffic that's lining up at this first traffic signal at Edmonston. And then, as Corey was mentioning, the details of how that signal would operate are still under evaluation, but it could either get an extended green to allow the bus itself to pull up in front of traffic that's stopped here, or an advanced green. So get the green first before other vehicles are allowed to travel through. And that dedicated queue jump lane would be constructed in the grassy median that exists today between Viers Mill and the service road. The improvements would also include some new and reconstructed sidewalk shown in pink along the south side of the service road. And then continuing in the eastbound direction, the BRT station platform is located on the east side of the second half of that partial signal. It's between Viers Mill Road and the service road. And in the westbound direction, it's a similar layout. The platform is between Viers Mill Road and the service road. And this includes some new sidewalk connections to the platforms themselves via a crosswalk along or across Viers Mill Road. Moving towards the middle of the corridor, we'll take a look at Atlantic Avenue, which I mentioned is another new BRT station location. Here at Atlantic, both station platforms are located on the west side of the intersection of Viers Mill and Atlantic. The eastbound station platform is curbside along that rightmost lane, and it's located just next to the local bus stop here at the corner. In the westbound direction, it's also a curbside BRT platform. In this case, it is in the location of the current bus stop today. So the existing bus stop would be relocated just slightly west of the BRT station, and that's shown where my cursor is here. Both of those would still be in front of the parking lot for the Twin Brook Shopping Center. And along this segment of Viers Mill Road, there are either right turn only lanes or right turn only and bus lanes. So the BRT would utilize some of those existing lanes as dedicated BRT lanes or shared with right turn vehicles. So in the eastbound direction, the BRT vehicles would enter that right lane where it develops, and where the rest of the vehicles are forced to turn right at Atlantic, the BRT vehicle would travel through the intersection to allow it to bypass some of that through traffic and jump the queue. And then similarly in the westbound direction, this rightmost lane is a right turn only lane. So all other vehicles would be forced to turn right, but the bus could continue through to then access the BRT station platform and then continue on towards Rockville. Moving on to Twin Brook Parkway. This is a location of both station platforms and queue jumps. The approximate location of these platforms has not changed much since the previous study. So it might look fairly similar to those of you who were involved previously. The eastbound station is located on the east side of the intersection of Viers Mill and Twin Brook. Here, the sidewalk would be reconstructed to wrap around the station platform, that's shown in pink. And the BRT station would take the place of the existing local bus stop. So at this location in particular, the local bus stops would be separated and replaced, one along Twin Brook Parkway on the west side and one along Viers Mill Road on the west side, excuse me. And then one along northbound Twin Brook Parkway. That one would be for the ride-on vehicles along Twin Brook and for WMATA vehicles along Viers Mill Road itself. In the westbound direction, a new right turn only and bus lane would be constructed. It would form on the east side of the intersection with Twinbrook Parkway and continue through all the way through on the west side to connect with an existing right turn only lane approaching Atlantic Avenue. The BRT platform here is located in the median between that new right lane and the service road. That's approximately in the place of the existing bus stop. So that existing bus stop would be replaced to the west side of the BRT station. And this again would operate like some of the other queue jumps. The BRT would enter into the right lane. All other right turn vehicles are forced to turn right at Twinbrook, but the BRT would continue through to access the station platform. This improvement also includes new and reconstructed sidewalks, so that's shown in pink, along where the new lane would be constructed.
We have a question from Mike Stein.
Sure.
He says, will the new protected bike lanes recently constructed on the west side be impacted?
I don't know if I am familiar with the location that Mike is talking about. On the west side of Viers Mill Road itself?
I'm assuming just east of here, the ones that they've constructed in the shoulder.
Yeah, the connector, the Twinbrook connector trail that connects Fishers to the Rock Creek Trail.
Yep.
Okay, Corey.
Okay.
We are aware of that, and in fact, Park and Planning are the ones who implemented that. They are what is called interim. I mean, until this project, comes to fruition and is constructed, there was a need for that. So Park and Planning was proactive. They coordinated with SHA. They got SHA's state's approval, and they built those dedicated cycle track. That's what they're called, with the guardrails and so forth. But they're interim, and they're aware of it. Once this project is constructed, if it gets funded for final design and construction, Park and Planning would relocate those cycle tracks. Very likely, I don't want to say 100%, but very likely it will be a shared use path through the park.
Thanks, Michael. Now that you clarified, I am familiar with that location. So Mike will be moving a little bit closer to the intersection at Aspen Hill, closer to those improvements in the next slide. Any other questions, Jen, before I move on?
No, that's it for now.
Okay, so here we'll go to Aspen Hill Road. These improvements include both the BRT station and queue jumps again. The location of the platforms also have not changed much here since the previous study. So the BRT station in the eastbound direction is located on the east side of the intersection. It does take the place of the existing bus stop, so that local bus stop would be replaced on the east side of where the BRT station is here. And access to the Rock Creek Trail would be maintained under this concept. In the eastbound direction, under this concept, the BRT vehicles would use the existing shoulder lane to provide a queue jump or a dedicated BRT lane, travel through the intersection at Aspen Hill to access the BRT station, and then continue to travel through along that shoulder that exists today along Viers Mill Road. In the westbound direction, the new station platform is proposed along the shoulder where the current bus stop is located. So similar to the other side, that current bus stop would be relocated on the west side of the BRT station. In this case, the existing sidewalk would be reconstructed to wrap around the BRT station. And similar to the eastbound direction, in the westbound direction, the BRT would use what is currently the right turn only lane as its queue jump lane to bypass traffic and then continue on into the existing shoulder to access the BRT station and the bus stop and continue through up towards Rockville. Our next location is Robindale Drive, which I mentioned was a shift of the BRT station from Parkland to Robindale. So here at Robindale, the eastbound platform is located on the east side between the existing edge of the shoulder or edge of the road and the current sidewalk, so within that grassy buffer. The existing sidewalk would be reconstructed to wrap around slightly the BRT station platform. In the westbound direction, the BRT platform is on the west side of Robindale Drive. Similar scenario, this does take the place of the current bus stop. So that current bus stop would be relocated just to the west of the BRT station. And the existing sidewalk would be reconstructed to wrap around the BRT station, allowing access to the station itself and continuing to provide access to the local bus stop. Here in the eastbound direction, the BRT would travel in either the shoulder or the right turn only lane. Those right turn vehicles would be forced to turn right at the apartment complex, but the BRT vehicle could continue through to access the station. And a similar approach in the westbound direction. Right turn vehicles would be forced to turn right, but the BRT could travel through the intersection to access the station. Next up is Parkland. This is no longer a station location, but it still includes queue jumps as part of the proposed improvements. So in the eastbound direction, the BRT would be coming from the intersection at Robindale and continue traveling in the shoulder lane or the right turn only lane. And then via a new lane on the east side of Parkland Drive or Gaynor Road, the BRT would continue through, but then merge into regular traffic. So this would be a newly constructed lane on the east side within the grassy median that exists between Viers Mill Road and the service road on the south side. So again, this operates as a queue jump, allowing the bus to bypass the traffic that's queuing up at this signalized intersection and then get a head start to then merge into the general purpose lanes. In the westbound direction, the BRT would utilize the existing right turn only lane and then the shoulder lane on the west side to continue in its own dedicated BRT lane. I'll pause for questions here, Jen, if there are any.
There are none at this time.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we'll head towards the east side of the corridor. First, taking a look at Randolph Road. And the improvement limits here span Viers Mill between Gridley Road and then Randolph Road, which is just off the page, but I'll get there. So let's take a look at the west side first at the intersection of Viers Mill and Gridley. In the eastbound direction, the station platform is proposed right in front of the Colonial Viers Mill Shopping Center, or the Dunkin' Donuts is right here on the corner. So it would be located right next to the existing current bus stop. And today there are two driveways provided to this shopping center. Under this concept, there would be one larger driveway that would provide both an entrance and exit to the shopping center from Viers Mill Road directly. And the existing sidewalk that's on the south side of Viers Mill would be reconstructed and wrap around the station platform as shown here. In the eastbound direction, the BRT would operate in mixed traffic, so it would be shared with either right turning vehicles or traffic that's heading through to go towards Wheaton. And in the westbound direction, the improvements do include a new lane, that's a new right turn only or bus lane. And so it would operate as a queue jump, specifically at Gridley Road. The bus would be in this rightmost lane. All the rest of the vehicles are forced to turn right at Stony Mill Shopping Center, and the bus would travel through onto the west side of Gridley Road and then get a chance to jump the queued up traffic and merge into the regular through lanes heading towards Rockville. So shifting over just to the east at the intersection of Randolph Road and Viers Mill. So again, here's that eastbound BRT station platform. This shows the limits of the new westbound lane that's right turn only and dedicated for the bus. So that lane develops just to the east side of Randolph Road. The bus would enter into this lane and access a new station platform that's shown right in front of the McDonald's here. The driveway to the McDonald's is proposed to be shifted slightly to the east in order to fit in the station platform. And then the bus would continue through the intersection and continue on past Gridley Road where we just looked. The next station is located at Connecticut Avenue. The location of these stations haven't changed very much since the previous study, but I will note that this is a location in particular that we're going to be focusing on during preliminary design for further intersection improvements. In the eastbound direction, the BRT station platform is located in the rather large island, median island here at the intersection, right next to the current bus stop. And there is a queue jump provided in this direction that's shown in orange. That queue jump would be a new lane within the portion of the island that's between the current edge of road and the island itself. So it would be a rather short queue jump lane that the bus would get into. The right turning vehicles would have already turned right along the ramp here. So the bus would have the ability to separate from the traffic that's queuing up at the intersection and then continue to move along eastbound. And just east of Connecticut Avenue, that the lane today is designated, the right lane today is designated as a right turn only or bus only lane. So the BRT would use that as a semi-dedicated BRT lane shared with right turn vehicles.
Christine, we have a question from Mensa.
Yes.
He asks, how are you planning to implement the timing of the queue jumps for smooth traffic?
So that's a detail that is yet to be worked out. And maybe Corey could provide some insight for US 29, but not being a traffic engineer, I don't know all the details that need to be confirmed to decide whether it's either that extended green or the advanced green. And there are certain locations that are more feasible for those changes than others. Corey, could you maybe add some?
Sure. We actually don't have any queue jumps on the 29 corridor, so it won't work exactly like the TSP on 29. Typically, the way a queue jump would work is if the signal's already green, the bus wouldn't necessarily have to get in the queue jump because it could just travel through the intersection with the traffic that's already moving through the intersection. In fact, it wouldn't, ideally, you wouldn't want it to get in the queue jump because it would need to then merge over into the traffic lane. The queue jump is really there as it approaches. If the signal is red, it would jump in the queue jump. It will have already alerted the signal that, hey, I'm going to be here, I'm in the queue, and really all it needs is a couple second head start. So much like in some of our urban areas, we have leading pedestrian intervals, which the signal will remain red for all of the approaches and will actually advance the walk sign to allow the pedestrians to get out in the intersection before we would turn the signal green. And that's usually just a couple second advance. The queue jump would work the same way. The bus would just get a couple second advance to allow it to start moving and get in the intersection. Then the signal would turn green. And by that point, the bus is already out and merging into traffic and out in front of it. So that's typically the way the queue jump would work. The TSP at the signals that don't necessarily have queue jumps would work differently. So it would make a calculation as to whether, you know, it can hold the green a little bit longer or advance the green. And again, those specific details, the actual signal timings haven't been calculated at this time. Those would be later details.
Thank you, Corey. Hopefully that answered your question, Mensa. I will cover, I think I missed the westbound direction here, so I'll just mention that in the westbound direction at Connecticut, the improvements would include a new lane, that's a new right turn only or bus only lane. that develops on the east side of Viers Mill approaching Connecticut. So the bus would enter that lane with right turn vehicles. The right turners would be forced to turn right on Connecticut. The bus would stop at the station platform just in the northeast corner of this intersection, and then continue through the intersection to bypass some of the traffic that's stopped at this traffic signal. I'll keep moving east towards Norris Drive. So as I mentioned briefly earlier, there is a new traffic signal proposed at Norris Drive, which is assumed to be in place by the time the BRT construction comes through. And those improvements are shown in this sort of off-white color. So they include 2 new crosswalks, one across Viers Mill Road, one across Norris Drive or Monterey Drive on this leg. Additional crosswalks may be provided as part of our improvements. That's an example of a detail we're still working out. But in the eastbound direction, the BRT station platform is proposed on the east side of Norris, and the driveway to this residential property would be shifted over slightly to construct the station platform. This concept also includes a new sidewalk connection between Newport Mill and Norris Drive, where there's no sidewalk today. And the BRT would operate in a dedicated lane on the right side. That's a right turn only or bus only lane that exists today. In the westbound direction, the BRT would be in mixed traffic, so using that rightmost lane with other through traffic. The BRT station is proposed to be located between Viers Mill Road and the Service Drive, just to the west side of Norris Drive. And it would include a new sidewalk connection that's compatible with the newly constructed improvements as part of the traffic signal. Next up is University Boulevard. These station platforms haven't changed much from the previous study. However, I think the eastbound platform was previously proposed on the east side of the intersection, and it's now been moved to the west side. So in the eastbound direction, that platform is located on the west side in front of this site. Is currently being redeveloped, so it would be compatible with that redevelopment. Our design team has been in coordination with the development team to make sure that our station platform is compatible with the conditions that are there when the BRT comes through. So for the moment, we're showing the platform just along the curbside here with the existing sidewalk reconstructed to wrap around the platform. In the eastbound direction, the platform would be located on the east side in front of this Pearl Vision here on the corner of Viers Mill and University. And part of the sidewalk that exists today along the north side of Viers Mill would be reconstructed through the station platform. I should mention in the eastbound direction too that the existing right turn only and bus lane extends up to and through the intersection of University Boulevard. So the BRT would continue to use that lane all the way through the intersection and then merge with the rest of through traffic as we get closer to downtown Wheaton. And then last up is the terminus station on the east end at Wheaton Metro. So under this concept, the BRT station is shown as replacing one of the existing bus bays within the bus loop at the Wheaton Metro bus area between Viers Mill Road and Georgia Avenue. So the BRT traveling southbound on Viers Mill Road would use the existing left turn lane, which is currently just a bus only left turn lane, to access the bus loop and then drop off and pick up passengers at a new BRT station on the north side of the loop. And this provides pretty direct access to the entrance to the Metro Red Line here. And I'll add that our team did coordinate with both WMATA and transit services at the county to select this location for the BRT stop.
Christine, we have a question from Ethan. He asks, any chance the route could eventually be extended to Silver Spring or could link to the Purple Line?
I'll take that one. So the way we're currently approaching each of the projects is kind of following, the corridor as it was laid out in the master plan. But at the end of the day, is run over road. So, if we saw a demand kind of east-west along the Viers Mill corridor, we could figure out a way to route, some of the trips down Georgia Avenue, which is also identified as a BRT corridor, which would carry it into Silver Spring, and make connections in downtown Silver Spring. So there's nothing to say that it couldn't in the future. As it's currently conceived, the easternmost terminus is Wheaton Metro Station, but obviously as the BRT network kind of grows and expands, it affords us opportunities to start to kind of interline or connect the various lines to serve trip origins and destinations a little bit better than maybe it would as kind of single corridors by themselves.
And then Christine, Louisa has a question. Is this, what you're showing on screen right now, is this the only time the BRT will need to make a left-hand turn?
I believe so, Louisa. Yes, because most of the time it's operating in the rightmost lane or close to the rightmost lane. So I'm thinking that's true, except at Montgomery College, now that I think about it. It would also make a left turn from northbound Maryland 355 left onto Manakee Street to access Campus Drive within the heart of the Montgomery College campus.
And then also from 355 to turn onto Viers Mill,
yes,
at that very awkward intersection in Rockville.
I have to drive the corridor in my mind to remember.
Michael, did you have something to add?
No, I was just going to mention what Christine already recalled, which was the left turn at Montgomery College and also the intersection of Viers Mill and 355. Thank you.
Great.
Okay,
Those are all the questions.
Okay, I will stop sharing my screen then and turn it back over to the PowerPoint presentation.
Do you want to take the rest of the presentation, Michael, or do you want me to close it out?
Yeah, I'll just quickly mention this, then we can close it up. As I mentioned, one component of this project, obviously, the biggest component is coming up with the station locations, the queue jump locations, and so forth. The station designs, we've been over that. Another component is station access, or as I call them, feeders, how to bring people to the stations on foot or on bicycle. To not get into it, there was a lot of material to cover tonight. So just want to mention that this is a component of the project. We are looking at every station within a half-a-mile radius of every station, how to bring people to the stations. And we will get into it more during preliminary and final design. At this stage, during the concept design, our good colleagues, our good consultants at RK&K, they have looked at master plans and all kinds of other data to identify the routes, if you will, where there's missing sidewalks, for instance, or potential for cycle paths to bring. So we have done that. It's what I call a bird's eye view at this stage, but just for tonight's sake, we don't want to really get into it that much. But it is a component, and you will see more of it as we move into preliminary design and final design. And as it was stated, obviously we're going to meet with you all and the public more, and there will be more opportunities to comment on that issues. As far as coordinating with other agencies, we are working with both Park and Planning, the City of Rockville, and WMATA, the top three as far as this project is concerned. And as I mentioned, obviously we will be back meeting with you all and also open houses to public meetings with the general public to share as the design develops and solicit more input and feedback from you all. Next. Where we are this phase, the planning concept design, we expect it to be finished by the end of October. Preliminary design is going to start this fall. As Corey and I talked about it before, we do have funding for it. So this project this phase will go to the end of preliminary design, which in engineering, we call it 30 or 35% design. That gives us usually all the more detailed elements to look into when we go into final design. We have a more robust cost estimate, obviously not as detailed as final design, but based on that, once preliminary design is done, we submit the funding request to the county, through the county executive and finally to county council of what this project's price tag would be for the final design, the engineering, the property acquisition, and the construction. We are in the process of applying for federal funding, and we are working on that. Obviously, we're just starting, but that's something we're working on. And as we move further into preliminary and final design, we will more closely evaluate the existing bus routes that are along this corridor or intersect with this corridor to, improve the operations as far as all transit operations are. And once again, we will continue meeting with the public and you all, the CAC, through preliminary design. If there are any other questions, we are here obviously tonight, but we will have an open house, a public meeting. First one is in October the 15th. This will be in English language. Then the same thing will occur again a week later. This corridor has about 40% of the population are Spanish speakers, and we project that even a higher percentage of the users of this transit would be Spanish speakers. So the next one, October the 22nd, would be in Spanish. You all are free to join for that. It will be pretty much in the same format with a virtual meeting. Next. And this is my contact information. You do see my phone number, but I request that because I do work from home like most people these days, the best way to reach me if you have any questions or you want to have any input or comments, just shoot me an email. That's my email there. So that's it. If there are any other questions, we are here to take your questions.
Jamie just sent a question through asking if you could send around a link to the final study with alternative 2.5.
Sure.
Yeah, we can do that. Yep, and the PowerPoint. So the tonight's PowerPoint, the final report I think is already on our project website, which I will note. So most of the BRT projects are on the website that you see posted on the back of the bus here, ridetheflash.com. That website is starting to transition as the US 29 project gets up and running to a website that will be more directed to riders of the service as opposed to projects. So we're migrating the project information to the internal DOT website. So we'll keep you guys apprised of where the documents are moving to, as well as when we post the video of this presentation, as well as the PowerPoint.
And we just got a question from Mensa. He's asking, how much funding are you looking at from the federal government?
Ideally as much as we can get. So there's a couple of different capital grants that are available from the federal government in terms of transit. There's a small starts grant, or what's called a small starts grant, and then there's also what's called a new starts grant. And they're kind of based on the scale of the project and what the project includes. The small starts grant, the price tag of the projects should be under $100 million, which this is. And the process doesn't have as many hoops to jump through as the new starts process does. And what we're hearing from others who have gone after the small starts grants, really to be competitive, you should be asking for about half the project cost. So we would be, looking for somewhere on the order of, ideally 49 to 50% of the project cost. But really, any additional funds that aren't county funds, will be helpful. The US 29 project, for example, was successful in competing for a Tiger grant. It was only $10 million, so it only covered about a quarter of the project's cost, but that was very instrumental in getting that project to move forward. Any other questions or comments about any of the material we shared tonight? Questions obviously don't have to stop tonight. You have Michael's contact details. If you have questions for any of the rest of us, Michael knows how to get in touch with us. Oh, I stand corrected. Joanna just messaged that small starts is for projects under 300 million, which is well under. Thanks, Joanna. Well, not seeing any other questions showing up. I'm going to say that we can call it and give everyone a half hour back to your evening. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us this evening. I would say that everyone has better things to do, but I know many of us aren't going out as much as we might have used to have gone out before the pandemic, but we still appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to join us and learn more about the project. And we look forward to, as we move into design and start to really put some more meat on the bones of this project, to share those details with you and hear your thoughts on, all the aspects of the project: stations, access, operations, etc. So I want to thank everyone again, and we'll call it a night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Everyone take care, stay safe.
Thank you so